They measure everything. The parents are here, but the heads are using forward. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to what day is it? August 15th, 2022, meeting of the Grosse Pointe Park City Council. So glad to see you all here this evening. Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Councilmember Brenner.
Present.
Gallagher.
Present.
Caulfield.
Present.
Senior.
Present.
McMillan.
Here.
And Mayor Hodges.
Present. And I would report that our colleague, Councilmember of Coscarello, is on vacation, so best wishes to he and his family. You all might notice that we have little treats here too. This was our way of promoting our wonderful small businesses. Tonight we have some popcorn from Cabbage Patch Saloon. If you've not had their popcorn, you must go. It's fantastic. Alicia Carlisle, the owner, is just one of those wonderful humans who does so many great things for our community, right? She's involved in Full Circle, the school district. So everybody flocked there. They have wonderful music. And then we have iced tea, non-alcoholic, I will say, in our social district cups from O'Flaherty's. So thank you to Russell for all he does for our community. He's been so involved in the formation of our After Six and Purchable parties, right, City Manager Seisland. So again, really wanting to support our local businesses in doing so in a fun way tonight. With that, we will move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. I ask that we all stand and face the flag. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is the approval of our consent agenda. Included on that for the benefit of our community members is the approval of our July 18th, 2022 meeting minutes, our committee and commissions reports, as well as our finance report. And with that, we've all had an opportunity to review those materials. A motion would be in order.
So moved.
Moved by Wiener. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Brenner. Is there any discussion? Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Brenner.
Yes.
Gallagher.
Yes.
Caulfield.
Yes.
Senior.
Yes.
McMillan.
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes. With that, our consent agenda has been approved. Next item on the agenda is the public comment for items that are on the agenda. I will remind you that you do have 3 minutes to speak. We do really enjoy this part of the meeting. It's important to be in dialogue with our community. You are the people that we represent. We want to know where your head and heart is on issues. We ask you to state your name as well as your street. And just to remind you, this is not the time for debate. With that said, however, we will do our best to be customer friendly. If it's a simple question we can answer, we will do that. And within that 3 minutes, if not, we will make sure you get where you need to get. And with that, because I feel terrible when I have to cut people off, I did go and I Googled a joke, and in my my search provisions were cut off jokes. And with that, the joke that came back was, my friend's water got cut off recently and he's starting to run out. So I sent him a card, get well soon. So with that, I'll say get well soon if you go over, okay? And just know I very much happy to cut anybody off. But for the purposes of good meeting management, keeping us efficient and moving forward, that is our meeting procedure. So with that long-winded, geez, I should stay in within 3 minutes, right? Is there anybody here who would like to be heard this evening? Are you all as suspicious as I am that nobody wants to speak? Okay, thank you for that. City Manager, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hodges. So just a brief recap on a couple items for City Council. Regarding the City Master Plan, which was successfully adopted by the Planning Commission and City Council at our last Planning Commission meeting at the recommendation of City Administration. A subcommittee was established to help advise the city on properties to be put up for sale, updated zoning, or other uses for our consideration. Public Works, after some delays with DTE, the project is in full swing again with brick mason work continues on the front of the building. Take a look if you have not. It's starting to come up well. And within the next few weeks, DPW will actually start moving some of the from old DPW to new DPW, just in the corners and such. So we thank DTE as well for helping us to expedite because they've got a lot of projects all over the state, and with the shortages, certainly everybody's got their hands on where they can get to. Update from Parks and Rec. Park and Rec will be hosting Camp Windy Mill September 9th through 11th. It'll be $90 per family, includes site all activities on the weekend. Sign up starts this Wednesday over down at Windmill Point Park. Drop-in pickleball started last Wednesday and is from 6 to 8 p.m. and Saturday mornings from 9 to 11. And we're excited, but starting in September, Park and Rec will be hosting men's over 30 recreational basketball leagues. So that'll be exciting to have over at the Lavin Center. We'll touch on it a little bit later, but I'll do some updates. So currently our DPW staff is actually separating alleys in the community. Right now they have an alley ongoing behind the ADT Med Spot on Kirchable and also separating the parking lot behind there. So we're getting two areas being separated. The next alley to be completed will be Kirchable North, which is right behind the Red Crown, will also be separated. So that's an in-house operation by our DPW staff, and they're a really talented bunch. After that, we'll probably look to start on the alley that'll be behind the Sprout House. As well, on the primary election, just as an update, thanks to Clerk Blayhut and Courtney Delmage and others that assisted, we had a successful primary election. Precincts 1 and 2 were at the Tompkins Center, 4 through 7 at the Lavin Center gym. We had about a 34% primary turnout with 1,992 absentee ballots that were submitted, along with 1,500 who voted in person at Windmill Point Park. That election will also be ongoing at the same location over in November. And I have to say kudos again to our staff for all the hard work they did and all of our volunteers that assisted. So I'd like to thank them. Be prepared, but more than likely at our September council meeting, I'd like to introduce to the city council a proposal for a water main project over on Mack Avenue. This is our highest concentrated area of water main breaks in the community. And so we've had actually 10 of those breaks in the last several years, in which that's in between Cadju and 3 Mile Road. OHM is currently going out for bid right now. And so we'll hopefully see a proposal at a future council meeting. FEMA funding, which is for the cleanup from the flood efforts of last year. We submitted more information to FEMA. There's a lot of follow-up back and forth, and we're just waiting for more clarification from FEMA. Speaking of FEMA, unfortunately, one of the grants that we applied for early, called the Building Resilient Independent Communities Grant through FEMA, the city did not get considered for that project. However, 53 projects were funded out of a national pool of 788. So we had quite a bit of competition for that. And then last but not least, I want to update real quick on our infrastructure and with our other council members on the infrastructure committee. We're working to add more information on the city website under the public works section, working on FAQs or frequently asked questions in regards to our water and sewer system, and information for residents to review for questions or thoughts that they may have regarding the proposed water sewer mill bill that will be on the ballot in November. I expect additional information about this to be shared through city media channels and other opportunities for public engagement. If there's any other thoughts or questions, I'd be happy to take those at this time.
Questions for our city manager? Yeah, Councilwoman Gallagher, thank you. On the water main for Mac. This is currently under our operating budget, right? O&M budget. Water mains currently sit at, I think it's about 50% repairs operating maintenance budget.
So depending on the cost of this, it's going to be in the hundreds of thousands for that. We'll expect to see that number. We may actually have to look into our reserves, where water sewer reserves will be.
So between the existing budget and the reserves, there are finances available
That would be
to
correct.
cover.
Yes, there would be to cover. Yes, depending.
And water mains are normal operating procedure under maintenance O&M.
Yeah. So
And
sorry. I was going to say for like patchwork. So when there's a main break right now, what we'll do, we'll cut out a section of the main. We'll actually put a patch in there, and that's under the operating maintenance.
So one of the slides that you presented last week for the infrastructure challenges that we have.
Yeah.
2 of the points that you have on the infrastructure needs,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the water mains as in support of the tax. And one of those you mentioned, emergency repair for these breaks is it's a major contributor to our operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the water main breaks and all of that is already budgeted as part of natural
operating and
procedure.
maintenance,
Right.
and
when we have in your water bill right now, so there's a capital improvement charge, some of that monies will go into the operating and maintenance of water sewer.
Okay, and that will continue for any of the water main
For any water
updates
main
that we
breaks.
may need,
Yeah.
right? So it's not necessarily out of the normal scope of operating procedure in terms of financing,
For,
unless we exceed some number, which we haven't yet.
So like with this project, obviously, we'll see what that number comes back with, that it could exceed that operating maintenance that we may have to look to our water sewer reserves to be able to help offset. But with my expectation with what that number will come back, we'll be able to offset that with those reserves.
Yes, and at this time, how much do you have in reserves?
We have roughly, Jane may be able to correct me, about 1.4,
1.8.
1.8, okay.
Okay.
So we currently have 1.8 in reserves that we can use for any emergencies that come up.
Yeah, and then like right now, we have, council, 100,000 for lead service lines, that was approved. We also had, the St. Clair Mount Falco project. We also have, a section of behind the DPW for that separation. And then we obviously want to keep that other little cushion in that case of, there's an emergency or something needs to be done and have that.
And those have already been accounted for in the budget as we already discussed those and passed those. So the 1.8 is not affected by those that you just mentioned.
No, that is affected in those.
So it will be,
So it's actually, it would be about 1.5,
okay,
probably around there, 1.4, 1.5 after those projects.
okay, which would be equivalent to what we would be raising in tax through the millage?
The proposal right now is roughly about 1.7 per year for 10 years total.
Okay,
So
so,
about 17 million total.
okay, so we'll look to, for the first year, raise 1.7,
That
and we already have 1.5.
Mhm.
Okay,
So it'd be about roughly, and then obviously with Headley rollback and that may end up going down more, but we'll stay roughly around 1.7.
have additional critical assets been identified yet, other than this particular water main?
So there's also a section of, not only there, but obviously sewer, separating alleys are really critical. We have our in-house that we're able to do on some, but we have other areas that we want to try and separate alleys. As well, we actually have an area, it may be on that section or it's in the FAQ as well, PowerPoint. Jefferson, right in front of us. We got a large area in front of the DPW building, in front of the grass lot in City Hall, that needs to be separated. So that's another large project that we have to look to address in the near future.
But no costs have been identified with that, and not necessarily identified as a critical need at this point, is that correct?
Well, talking with OHM and, the team and DPW, looking at critical paths forward, obviously, this water main is a critical path. This section of Jefferson is another critical path. And then with the work that Pipe Tech has done, they're looking at, we also have, they're going to compute, working with OHM, so that you'll be able to address other critical needs of infrastructure. As well, in the drinking water revolving fund loan that the city went for and continues to go for, OHM identified areas within the city that are critical water mains that need to be addressed. So they actually had a map and showed certain sections, like you could say, the area in West Park, you could say over near Caju, those are areas. So there's a couple critical needs that need to be done.
Have they been identified in the capital improvement fund, any of these?
No, not recently, no.
Well, that's a bit of a mistake. The entirety of the waterman network for the entire city has been identified, going back before this current sitting of council. Not to mention the lead lines. I mean, I think there's a little disconnect here where we're talking about immediate projects, immediate capital projects, which we're looking into, but the entire scope of the water main network is already beyond end of life. I mean, this was talked about by the previous infrastructure committee. They were identifying it as a broad stroke need, but we have to meter this out in terms of where are we going to target first. The Mac Caju water main section is the most common breakage area. And also when we talk about maintenance, there's a difference between maintenance and replacement. I mean, the budget right now is where we're patching breaks, but that does nothing for the longevity of the water main system. And again, we've talked about this in the past, but the water main network in the city is cast iron, which has approximately 80-year lifespan, and it was installed roughly a century ago. So the entirety of the network is high need and priority, and again, has been identified as such. Couple that with lead line replacement, which again, huge scope of work. But we're trying to, draw that down into areas that we can address, because in the past we do huge network systemic issues, actually having it broken down to key areas of water main, then we can actually start tackling them on a case-by-case basis.
So my question to you was whether or not this had been identified in the capital improvement fund previously.
The
Water main.
water main for Mac Avenue and the
Yes.
capital improvement, no.
Is it? No, it has.
And the capital improvement fund, no.
No, but
Yeah.
as a capital improvement need, potentially.
Yes, that could be something put in there that, yes, that is a critical. If you had that chart today, that would be within the top 3. That is a critical need.
So help me understand, if we're,
Yeah.
the water mains is a distribution of water,
Okay, yep.
right? It helps to distribute water to us.
Throughout the community.
Throughout the community.
Yep.
And how much does that flow impact our removing water in case of a flood?
Well, this would be, that's a separate issue. So in this case, this is just drinking water going to your home.
This has this water
Not
main
for sewer.
upgrade or
Yeah.
patches has nothing to do with the need to remove or impacting our ability to remove water in case of a flood.
No, yeah, this is just drinking water supply going to your home and then through the service line going to your home.
Okay.
Yep. Because we have roughly, majority of our community is about 6-inch water mains, and we would look to go to an 8-inch water main.
But again, it's distribution of water to homes. It's not removal of water from our basements. This
Correct.
water main projects, this upgrades to our patches and
Correct.
again, most of that is budgeted currently under the operation and maintenance budget
For patches, yes.
as a standard operating procedure.
Yes.
Unless we identify a critical asset need, which has yet to be identified,
Well, in this,
other than Mac Avenue, which we have the money for. And between our current budget and the reserves. Correct?
I think if where you're going, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my only question at this time. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Gallagher. Yes?
Yeah, my question, thank you, Mayor. Is there any update on the fire that happened at Beaconsfield, with that building, anything going on there?
Yeah, so I talked with Terry Brennan today, and he's over in Grosse Pointe City today, but he'll be over in the park tomorrow and talking with the homeowner and seeing where we're at, the status update. Right now, the insurance companies, going through that process with the homeowners, and there's several areas we identified, the need for cleanup, and then there could be an expectation, depending upon how long it takes with insurance, that we might require significant lead time that they have to screen the area, put up a fence until, which in this case, it looks like the home, it's totally demolished. So that's where we're at right now. I can certainly keep you up to date as we move on.
Yeah, because I know a lot of residents are wondering what's happening with it.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Next item, information. Yes, please. I just want to know, I have 2 other questions around the tax, and I'm wondering if this is the appropriate time to do that now or under old business. Okay, under old business. I know I see it here as addressed within your, under council development, unfinished business. So,
Unfinished business.
unfinished business?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Director Gerald, you are up. Welcome. Forgot the napkins, sorry. Put your pant legs for.
So good evening, council members. So the public safety update tonight, again, as usual, leading off crossing guards. We're going to be entering into the school year here pretty soon. We still need crossing guards. I have noticed a problem on our website. It says to click on the application, but there's no hyperlink to do that. So I'm working with city staff to fix that. So if you are interested in becoming a crossing guard, we'd like to have you. $18 an hour. You can work one day or all 5 days. It doesn't matter. We're flexible. We'll take anybody we can get. We continue to work towards some solutions on alley safety. We're still trying to coordinate a meeting between the 5th Precinct Commander in Detroit and us. as well as hopefully bringing him into the Grosse Pointe Harbor Woods Chiefs breakfast on every second Tuesday of every month, so we can all have just open dialogue and see what's going on. So we're still working towards that. We do have 2 people now trained as safety seat technicians, child safety seat technicians, and we're gonna be posting some schedules as soon as we figure out how we're gonna do this. So keep an eye out on Facebook and the websites for that service. That will be a free service that we will offer. And then our first babysitting class is tentatively gonna be held September 17th at the Tompkins Center. It's a 4-hour program. First 2 hours is going to be on child and infant CPR and first aid. And then the second 2 hours would be on how to identify certain household hazards and things like that to keep the little ones away from it. There is going to be a $10 fee for that, $5 fee for the Red Cross for the CPR certification card, as well as the additional $5 is to offset our printing costs for the books and stuff like that. So keep an eye out on that. That'll be posted soon. I'm going to be meeting with SEMCOG on Wednesday to discuss safety enhancement for the crossing between Defer Elementary and Pierce Middle School. So I can provide an update on that at the next council meeting. Our open house is scheduled for Sunday, September 25th. It's going to start with a Faith in Blue Mass at St. Clair Montfalco. After that, it'll transition back over to the Public Safety Building here, where we're going to have displays, demonstrations by public safety personnel, as well as food and refreshments for everybody. And I do want to stress everyone, this is not just for park residents. Anybody who wants to come by and see Grosse Pointe Park Public Safety is more than welcome.
Can you repeat the date and time of that again, please?
The 25th, starting with a mass at St. Clair Montfalco. So I'm not sure what time their mass starts. Is it 9?
There's a 9 and there's 11, so you probably do the 11? If you're coming back later, whatever you pick.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they've decided on. That was being worked on by some others. But I'll get that out. I'll get that out. No, I know that there's 2 start times. Okay. And then finally, I want to address some information that was going on around on social media lately regarding the staffing of public safety. So I just want to provide a quick background. So currently, public safety operates on the following basis. We have 4 platoons working 12-hour days. Each platoon consists of 2 supervisors and 5 public safety officers. It's necessary to have 2 supervisors on every platoon because if a supervisor takes the day off, you have to have somebody there as you know, who's in charge and who's been trained. They can never allow to be off on the same day. So we always have a supervisor working. Up to 2 people are allowed off, meaning the current minimum is 5 officers. Of the 5, 1 is on standby, and that's in case the ambulance or the fire engine is needed to be taken out to a location. And then everybody else meets them there. If somebody calls in sick, then we're left with 3 public safety officers who are patrolling the streets. There are also times when a dispatcher is not available, so we have to put an officer in dispatch. And that happened all last week because both of my day shift supervisors had COVID. So we were staffing dispatchers with police officers. So with recent reductions to my staffing levels, we're going to currently have 6 officers per platoon. And so therefore, I'm going to be implementing the following operational changes. If 5 or 6 of the officers are present, operations continue as normal. If we have 4 officers working, which is now going to be the new minimum, we'll do normal operations except in the event of a working structure fire, where we would have to wait for additional personnel to arrive before beginning an interior attack of the fire due to OSHA requirements and rules. So in other words, we can get there, we can hook the hose to the fire hydrant, we can spray water on it from the outside, but by OSHA rules and standards, we cannot go into the house and fight the fire like we had to on Beaconsfield. Not until additional people get there. In the event that we have only 3 officers working, which has occurred several times recently, you get 2 people off, somebody calls in sick or is injured, which we are also experiencing right now, or we need to fill the dispatch position. If that occurs, the ambulance will not be put in service. We will notify MedStar that they'll be used for all medical calls. We will not have an officer assigned to standby. So in the event of a fire, the nearest officer would have to respond to the station, get the fire engine and take it out to the scene. In the event of a fire, we will automatically call a 3rd alarm And that's to ensure that we have enough people on hand, and there will be no entry or interior attack again until there's enough people to satisfy the OSHA requirements. And also no community events will be attended. So I do want to assure the community that we have a extremely dedicated staff who continues to come in and they do their job and they do it diligently. We are evaluating constantly our processes and procedures for ways to maintain or improve our service levels, such as our automatic aid with Grosse Pointe City and an assurance from them that in certain events or certain circumstances, they will assist us with law enforcement activities as well. And that is my update for tonight.
Mr. Wiener?
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
So back to, questions, common questions that I'm hearing. There's been a lot of discussions in the public safety meeting as well about the cost recovery ordinance.
Yes.
Just wondering, because this is a good forum with a lot of people in town, would you mind speaking to that and just reiterating kind of what who's got it employed currently and how it functions? Just because, again, I think a lot of people aren't quite clear on it, and great time to talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I forgot to put that in my update, so I was going to do that. But yeah, the cost recovery ordinance, the purpose of it would be to simply recover costs of public safety that are outside the normal scope of what we do. It's for people who are at fault and were negligent in some manner that causes an at-fault accident or whatever the case may be, a responsible party. Every one of the Grosse Pointes has a cost recovery ordinance, including other outside agencies, Southfield, Waterford, many departments have it. And so the purpose is just to recover our costs instead of having the taxpayers of Grosse Pointe Park pay for the negligence of somebody else, that person's insurance company will. Does that answer it?
Yeah, like I said, this is a common question I get, so I just thought it'd be good to kind of speak to it. Obviously, there's nothing in place yet, we're still discussing it, but
Still in discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You and your team do tremendous work for our community. And there's not a day that I go to bed and I don't feel safe here. So I thank you for your time and commitment. I know it's a challenge with COVID and other scheduling changes, vacations, et cetera. You talked about an officer on standby. Is this similar to an officer on call, or is he actually at the facility just standing by? Okay. In those instances where we, as you described, would not have enough people to enter into a building if there was a fire, and is there an opportunity, knowing that we may have potential staffing issue that would not allow us to go into a fire, that we could, under our shared community relationships with our neighbors, that we know in those instances that when a call comes out, we can immediately reach to them so that there is no waiting for other folks. So if it's a 3 alarm that triggers additional support, or a 5 alarm that triggers an additional support, in those instances where we know that we are short, can we immediately implement that to ensure that we have assistance from other communities so as not to wait to enter into a building?
Yeah, so let me explain what the OSHA rule is. It's called 2 in, 2 out. So if you're going to send firefighters into a building, you send in 2 and you have 2 on standby outside. They are there for relief or rescue operations. They can't do anything else but wait until the other 2 come out to relieve them, and then they rotate. From there, so that's 4 officers or firefighters. From there, you have to have an on-scene commander or incident commander. That's the person that directs incoming resources on where he wants them, what they want them to do. And then you have to have an engineer or somebody working on the fire truck who's operating the pumps and the valves and getting the water flowing and doing all that kind of stuff.
FDM.
So that's 6 people. So if I'm down to the new minimum of 4, I can get there. Like I said, I can pull hose, I can, throw water on it from the outside. I can do all those things. I can't send anybody in until other people show up. We have an automatic aid agreement with the city of Grosse Pointe, and we have mutual aid agreements with all the Grosse Pointes. And so automatic aid means if we get a fire, they automatically come. We don't even have to call them. They come. And it works in reverse. Same thing for them. If they get a fire, we automatically go. In these staffing conditions, what we're going to end up doing is, if we get a fire and it's an actual working fire, we're gonna automatically be calling the farms. So we'll have the third alarm, which will ensure that we have enough people to fight the fire.
Have we ever been caught in an instance where we didn't have enough people and we were waiting?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay, good.
Not that I know of.
So, I mean, we're dealing with COVID and in these times it can be a bit challenging.
Yeah.
But there are procedures in place that enable us to provide the community with the services that they need through our mutual agreements.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
The other challenge we have right now is we have several of our officers that are actually on injury right now. So on paper, we have, in theory 7, but, what we have right now, we actually have 6 of those positions.
One of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading these things online and the complaints online, I know in the medical field, in the hospitality field, and many other fields, there's what's called an on-call list, right? So you have officers who may not be scheduled that day, or doctors who may not be scheduled that day, or wait staff. But when someone calls in sick and you're short of staff, those folks who are on-call list are then, there's an assumption that, hey, if they're short, I'm on their list and I know I've got to go in. This is something that's probably a contractually negotiated
Correct.
position, and maybe something to consider in those negotiations.
You're gonna relegate or regulate somebody's off-duty time and having them on standby under FLSA, you would have to compensate them for that. Unless you contractually negotiated it away somehow, and I don't see what that they would do that. But it's something.
Well, I think the bottom line tonight is we all want to know that the community is well protected. That's a primary objective of government, is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of people and property. So if there is, I'm assuming we have no concern that we are adequately covered, but if we do need to implement measures that ensure that, I would hope our staff team would come back with recommendations. I would hope committee chair, Mr. McMillan, if you think there's anything that this body needs to be doing, that you'd be working closely with the staff and bring that back to us. But at this point, I think we can be confident that we're in good hands, correct?
We do the same exactly for any of our Grosse Pointe communities. If there's a fire, that's in Grosse Pointe Farms and they need our help, we'll do that. Grosse Pointe Shores, Woods, it doesn't matter. Any case, we're always on each other helping. Excuse me, not only just the park, we have other communities in the points that actually, just with COVID or other, injuries and staffing issues that we automatically will respond to that as neighbors.
As Councilwoman Gallagher said, we know we're in good hands.
Yeah.
So thank you for being the cream of the crop and ensuring that we can sleep well at night. So thank you, Director Gerald. I think we're good on questions.
Yeah.
And just before ending, I do think we need to call out the staff team again for the performance on Election Day. So thank you so much for our team and for the community being flexible during this time. I think our experiment went very well. We're very pleased with that. Our turnout was solid. So thank you so much for going the extra mile, staff team. It was a pleasure to read the reports in the Grosse Pointe News, and that were even our League of Women Voters Leadership and Chair of Voter Services, and that was very pleased with the outcome, particularly in Precinct 5. We all wanted to make sure that the folks had access. So thank you to our team for always making us proud. You guys are outstanding. Moving on to unfinished business, our OHM sewer report. Welcome, Patrick and Nancy. I was singing Rain, Rain, Don't Go Away like a week or two ago, hoping that our flow metering, not a lot of rain, just enough rain, right? An inch? Still not there though, right?
Yeah.
Every day I see it and it belongs right.
It's a weird conundrum, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But welcome, and we look forward to your report.
So within the packet tonight is the same typical report, but a few key updates to highlight. We have received the I'll call it final deliverable from Pipe Tech in terms of their inspection of the sewer system and manholes that they were able to get to. So we do have that now, and the next steps would then be to process that and basically evaluate the findings that we get from all the scoring data that's done on each one of the segments and manholes. And then we can set up recommendations for the coming years in terms of both better operations and maintenance, but then also some capital improvements on a couple occasions. Those really being, again, maintenance of the pipes, some additional manholes in certain areas where we can improve access. And then if there's any, what we call structural issues, get those addressed as well. They're now focusing north of Jefferson. We did a lot of work last 2 months south of Jefferson. We're on the west side of the city. All the segments they can get to, they work to get those cleared out and continue to remove significant amounts of material from the system, about 86 yards of the last month. Typically, we're seeing 5 to 10 yards a day, depending on the segments you're looking at. Other items of note before Nancy talks a little bit about the model. The next step is on the downspout disconnection. We've really completed all those, meeting with staff for the last couple of weeks. The goal now would be to put out a second set of letters for those that didn't respond, just to basically get their read on, acknowledge that they received the letter, and then provide a status update if they can on their particular home. We want to get that information back to the city staff here so we can really evaluate the work ahead in terms of doing that disconnection across the city. We've also indicated that we'll be looking at some future projects. Andrew Seisel mentioned on Jefferson Avenue, that's one of the ones that we've elevated as one of the areas that we need to address. Again, trying to focus on areas that are close to the problems that we've encountered in the past. So Jefferson Avenue is an area that we've identified as still having connected catch basins, that sort of thing. And I think with that, the majority of the major updates, and then Nancy is going to be meeting tomorrow with Eagle, and try to provide a little update on that. And as Mayor Hodge just mentioned, we have had some precipitation events, not significant enough.
Yeah. So we met with Eagle, seems to be always the day after the council meeting, but so previously we met with Eagle, city was there as well as OHM, had a really good discussion about next steps and gave them the preliminary base of design of how we came up with the model. So tomorrow, Eagle and some of it OHM really getting technical about how the model was developed and just make sure everyone's on the same page about the existing model and then the EERB and how it was developed. You recall we have the model right now based on the pump station. We have long data, we have that SCADA, so it's constantly running and it's good data. We can look at past events and calibrate a model based on that. Sorry, not calibrate, but build it. But we do need those meters that are currently installed, those 6 along Jefferson, to really calibrate and validate what we have built to date. So that's kind of why tomorrow we're meeting with Eagle to get technical about next steps and really technical talk. I think they got bored a little bit last time because everyone like, let's come back to the high level. So doing that tomorrow. And then for the flow meter, we kind of changed it up. I kind of wanted to show you guys how much rain we've actually got in the past 3 months because we keep saying, oh, it rained a little bit. It really has just done a lot of small events. We really want at least a half an inch or greater to see how the system responds, and we're just not getting there. It's like there was one in August that just happened, but I just saw the data and it's still we need a little bit bigger for this system to really see the response between the upper trunk and the lower trunk. So June looked like we had a lot of rain, but there's a lot of small rain events that happened throughout the month. So it rained almost a little bit every day to get up to that almost 4 inches. But again, it was less than 0.5 inches of rain. So yeah, we'll report back next month about the technical discussion with Eagle about the model. Next steps for the EERB.
Questions, anything to add, Councilmember Wiener, as chair?
No, I mean, unfortunately, knock on wood, we haven't had
Right.
issues, but it's like the polar opposite of last year. But, and team's been diligent trying to build kind of secondary ways to model this and get Eagle the information that they need to move forward. And then the past meeting we just had, I spoke to this in the update, but they're very responsive. I mean, Eagle's been extremely positive. They're very happy with everything we're providing them, and they've been acutely aware of that some of this is out of our hands. But that said, even with that, we're still going far above and beyond what they were originally looking for. So knock on wood, it's proceeding.
Councilwoman Miller?
Yes, thank you. If we had approximately 300 properties that were inspected for the downspouts, if somebody wants to still participate in that, can they, or do they have to wait their turn now?
Absolutely. Anybody who wants to participate can reach out to DPW Direct, can reach out to Council Direct, send an email, anybody who's watching this, yeah. Yep, and again, we're proactive about it. A few friends of mine, I got them, the DPW team just came out to their homes and reviewed it. Again, I'm like a broken record on this, but again, it's just trying to reduce the inflow of water. And, especially with some older homes, there are going to be limitations. DPW, the city is not going to make anybody do something that's unsafe. Like, we're not going to say disconnect everything and spit it onto your driveway where it can freeze over. We're not going to do something that jeopardizes, some homes where the pitch of the house. And there's going to be some homes where you can't disconnect everything. My home's one of those. I disconnected everything I could. I put spouts into the lawn, but there are some areas that simply can't be done. The city will work with residents on that. Again, they're not going to make any demands that are financially burdensome either. But the point being, if you have 20 downspouts, even if you can take 2, 3, that's still less water going to the city. That's our goal right now. So yes, people should reach out.
And I'll say connected or disconnected, we would like to know, so then update our map and show what is connected. And it's not just reach out. Even if you don't know, or DPW can do that.
Okay.
Help. And there's a flyer, I think, on the website too about how to do it.
Well, and just to confirm that further, I had an opportunity to walk with a resident this weekend, and his was the same question. He disconnected his downspout. He wanted to know if he needed to report that. The answer is yes. So if he's having that question, other members in the community are as well too. And I think right now, Councilmember McMillan, it's people's chance, it's an opportunity to willingly comply, right? Because at some point, we're going to continue to up our enforcement of it. So right now, we're in that stage where we're encouraging you to comply on your own, get it done. So yes, please do not take the brakes off or the gas off of disconnecting your downspouts, because at some point you're going to be required to. So, and the other thing people can do is to continue to make way for you to find the manhole covers in that as well, right? So if residents wanted to leave this meeting with an set of action items, one would be continue to disconnect your downspouts, reach out to city staff, our engineering team if you need help, make way for your manhole covers if you haven't been able to find them. Are there any other quick, easy things our residents can be doing to be good teammates back to you and to protect our health and property?
There's some much larger long-term things. So if you do have paved surfaces and you have a way to do them in a more green way, if you can use pavers or other things that help to basically reduce the amount of runoff, that's always a good thing too. If you have extra paving, you don't need. Those are good long-term things, but the point of what was just said at the table, downspouts and manholes, anything we can do to help find those and disconnect. It's just going to take a lot of those small things, but they add up and they mean it's a very significant improvement.
Well, the city manager is saying rain barrels, so maybe we could get like a little cheat sheet to go out on social media
I
or
tried
something.
to get one on the free page yesterday, but someone already took it on my street. So otherwise, I would have tried.
Okay, all right.
Even our building department, they're assisting with this process too. We have our rental inspector and building official that are going out to multiple properties in a day, commercial and residential, and also identifying those connections and disconnections.
Well, I know our ordinance review committee is looking at ordinance as
Looking at
well,
more
so
ways, yeah.
thank you for that leadership. And then we just can't forget, somehow that Cranes Detroit Business article popped. Well, actually, there was some significant reporting in Cranes Detroit Business recently and regarding St. Ambrose as well. And we were reminded that of our 4,000 households, more than 3,000 were affected. So we can't forget what happened just over a year ago and continue to be diligent. So thank you for being here every month. Are there any other customer?
Just, I'm asked this question every month. It might be more of a question of what do we do now from the city, but 25% of sewers plant inspection could not, pretty significant. I just want to know, especially south of Jefferson, where I think there is a lot of issues with getting there. Do we have an idea of where these may be located? Is Pipe Tech using this as our plan to attack this 25%?
I think there's a combination of things. On one hand, there could be buried manholes. On the other hand, they may have never been built in the first place. So it could be a situation where, when some of this was built over 100 years ago, maintenance was really not thought of the way we think of it now with PV trucks and motorized autonomous type cameras. So I think there's a modernization of the system in the south area. So that's one of the projects we've talked about. Really, right after we started this, we're having the challenges is that we just have to do some upgrades in that area to make this a more maintainable system. It used to be a combined system.
Right.
You had the flushing that happened, and that's less common. If we have these warm periods, we do have these dry times. So that's really, I think.
And Patrick, I know we talked about, it might have been the last council meeting or the one before, but we had some unused balance with Pipe Tech that they're doing some additional cleaning in that southwest section of the city right now that was identified at 25%. Because I did have some questions from residents, which I expected to have, and that, we want to try and get as much as we can possible. And as Patrick said, we got to have some additional areas for OHN and DPW expect in the future.
And to follow up, sorry, Councilmember Gallagher.
Thank you. You talked about the lower and upper pipes.
Yeah,
Better,
Yeah.
right? So you're looking to understand the flow between those. That will have an impact on your design, correct?
yes,
And how you're designing the removal of water from the city in flooding.
in terms of, are you referencing the EERV?
Yes.
So it's not, we run the model with different designs. The ERV is predicting to alleviate the issues depending on the different rain event. Right now for us in Eagle, we need a storm event to see the diversions and flow into the 120-inch in real time versus programming and simulating and making things happen with just changes in parameters in a model. We need to see the dynamic in real life to check that validation.
It's more so, I'm sorry, but it's more so that Eagle is wanting that data.
It's ERV's design, but it's just now
Yeah,
doing a final validation.
Yeah.
For the,
It's Eagle that wants that.
yes.
Well, and I think from our perspective, it's important as well because we want to know that we're getting as much water into that lower trunk as we can. Because if it's a situation where there's a bottleneck, and the models really, when that flow data comes in, we'll start to see that. So we have the model built based on what we think is typical throughout the city. We've scoped and done investigations. But if we're seeing something where the model is just not jiving with what the flow data is, it helps us triage it and if there's any sort of additional work we need to do. Because if it's a situation where there's a bottleneck that's going to limit the effectiveness of ERV, we want to know that because it's going to really play into the operations protocol we're going to develop.
So to Tom's point about the south of Jefferson, this is the low point in our city and it's where we see the most flooding, generally speaking. So the flow, as you just described, could potentially not create enough flow for the EERV to be as effective as what we would like. Hence, waiting for that flow information to come through so that if a design change needs to happen, it can happen.
I think the design that we have is, we've made assumptions to really plan for moving as much water through as we can in the shortest period of time. So from the standpoint of what is designed down at Essex and 3 Mile, we think that's going to stay the way it is. The question is whether there are any additional alterations within the sewer system that we need to help basically get flow to that point.
So additional cross connects potentially
Correct.
in other
Or
places
modifications.
or modifications. So your confidence in the existing design as it is seems to be fairly high in your commitment in the ability to move water in such high flows. And you don't expect that much of a change other than potentially adding another cross connect here or a cross connect there that may help to enhance that flow and move water away from the city. Is that a fair statement? Okay, so based on that, have we started to order the parts for what you believe to be is what is the best design currently? So that when we do get the permit, as Councilmember Gallagher has indicated that where our permit is coming from, it's all positive, everybody seems to be really happy, the anticipation is that it's coming, you feel very confident that you have the best design, we know that you feel it's not going to change, other than maybe adding additional more. Have we ordered the pieces in order to, once that permit comes, we're not waiting a lead time, for us to start installing that design that you feel so confident about?
So we've been certainly having, we've done outreach to suppliers, to get an idea about the lead time. I think when the June packet kind of identified that lead time with a couple of the system components. Backwater valve and the sluice gate being the ones with the longest lead time. Pipe and structures is, it's a 6 to 8 week kind of thing, so. I guess that's all I can speak to on that, but.
In the previous infrastructure meeting, we talked about this at length. It's also in part of the packet. So we've identified the biggest lead time components. And again, our directive is we want to move forward with the purchasing of components, but obviously there's I'll delve into it. We're going to address this in the infrastructure meeting. The big concern is obviously an outlay for equipment because the EPRV, we're supremely confident in everything. Frankly, the bottleneck right now is Mother Nature. But one of our concerns was we didn't want to put the city on the hook to make an outlay for a piece of equipment that may have a singular use. So working with OHM, we identified the sluice gate and backflow preventer. There are secondary uses. So it's a multi-use component, which again, we want to move forward. We're investigating, confirming, lead time confirming, hoping to come to the next meeting with this. So that worst case scenario, if there was a permit issue, we have a secondary use for it already mocked up, ready to go, designed, which will also serve the sewer system. So again, insulating the residents or the city from a liability of having a piece of equipment that's going to collect dust. So yeah, we've already moved forward on this.
And the project doesn't require a permit.
And it does not require a permit.
So to this point, as I understand that, then there seems to be no roadblocks for ordering equipment.
Roadblocks are allocation of city money.
Right, so
Right.
there are policies and procedures.
And again, we have.
But there is a budget, right? And if we talk about urgency and criticality to our community, and we talk about available budget and available funds, and we have an understanding of what we say is the most optimal design and an alternative second use for that design,
So
then the policies and procedures that we talk about here are important. But as you expressed last month, Mayor Hodges, was the most important is to protect our residents and to ensure that our residents have the ability to protect their belongings and the basement and the flooding. So I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I respectfully ask that we really put pen to paper and move forward and order this equipment, given we have alternative solutions for it, and it will not just collect dust.
respectfully, Councilmember Gallagher, I suggest that you read the updates we're sending out. Like the
I do read.
infrastructure meeting, this was one of the linchpins of the infrastructure meeting we went over. You're getting this information. It's the same thing as the questions before about the severity of the water mains. We've been talking about this for years. I don't understand why we're acting as if this is out of left field. Anyway, I digress. We've had these conversations. That is kind of the linchpin of the last meeting and the updates we've been putting forward. And again, one more time, we had plenty of conversations. There are pending lawsuits in front of the city because of water sewer. So we have to be somewhat guarded in how in depth we go in this forum as well. So we're trying to make sure everyone's appraised of everything that's going on. Real quick, Councilmember Caulfield, you were talking about the scoping. Another thing too, and again, we chatted about it a little bit in the infrastructure meeting, but just so everyone else hears, in the capital improvement plan, like the pipe tech scoping of our sewers, this is not intended to be a one and done. One of the other action plans that we have in our lungs, again, we're still working on financing, but one of the action items is that we want to actually dissect the city up into segments and have kind of a continuous scoping of the sewer, continuous cleaning going on. Again, the mantra right now of infrastructure has been to be proactive. So it's not addressing a break. It's rather addressing the things before they happen, because frankly, preventative maintenance is going to be much cheaper, much better financial move for the residents in the long term. So yeah, the water main, or rather the manhole covers are definitely an ongoing issue. I mean, a lot of them are buried, and so, but that's one of the things Pipe Tech is kind of identifying, and we've had conversations with OHM too, working out kind of a long-term plan now based off of the information we're getting Pipe Tech to build off of that structure and model. So
It's clear to me that I would call for point of privilege here. This is not out of left field. This is actually on point. So,
Again, then please read the updates that we're sending out, because it seems like you're saying that you're caught off guard by what we've been voicing to council.
Another point of privilege. I never said I was off guard. I do read the updates, and I am asking pertinent questions that are important to our community and to the progress of implementing what is the most important piece of protecting our city in terms of infrastructure.
The one request I'd make of you then, in the previous meeting, you had a discussion, but in the following month, I didn't see a single question sent to anyone on the infrastructure committee or to the city. Again, we'd like to address questions, but then actually send it to us in a constructive way. We had an infrastructure meeting. We went over all this in detail. Again, I'm trying to keep everybody appraised of things here, but there is a, best practice to actually move this along efficiently. So.
Well, Councilmember Viner, I know you've been diligent in addressing all of these concerns, so I think that should give you comfort. Councilwoman Gallagher, I mean, these are important issues. We do have a fiduciary responsibility that we need to meet. There are certain obligations we have for purchasing and having proper approvals and the like. And so it's clear you've been on top of all these things. I'm grateful for that. And that is really what governance is, right? A lot of the work needs to happen at the committee level. Those questions should be happening there. That's the best thing. And the community does need access to all this information. So we do encourage the community to be involved at that level too. But I'm confident that you can get all your questions answered from Councilmember Viner as well as our engineering team. And I know the conversations I've had with Councilmember Viner have been exactly what you just said. And I think you'd feel good about it if you. And then when I can attend those meetings and I have scheduled flexibility to do so, I will. And when I have access to OHM and their reports, which we receive here, I have the opportunity to ask those questions. And to your point, Major Hodges, earlier, there are, if you have a question, I'm sure there's going to be other residents here sitting in the community that have those questions. And I'm sure there are residents in our community who are not reading your updates or are not in your committees. And so this is another opportunity for the community to have access to that information. All right, is there any further discussion or questions for our individuals who are probably ready to sit down, take a load off, so to speak? All right, OHM team, thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is council comment. Councilwoman Gallagher, I believe you had questions regarding the millage. I do, thank you, Mayor Hodges. So I just have questions. So on the slides that you presented, we talked about, and the millage language talked about a 10-year millage. We have identified in our previous discussion here that water mains are currently under existing budget for O&M maintenance and are not a part of removing water out of our community and those flooding areas. And I asked the question if you address one of the main points for the tax millage is for lead lines. But that lead line program is a 20-year program. And I asked the question why we're asking for a 10-year millage and not dispersing it across a 20-year millage in line with the lead line requirements.
So right now, yes, you are correct that there is a 20-year that for those lead service lines. I believe we're in year 18 right now or 19 for that year. And so in Grosse Pointe Park, we have roughly about 2,000 lead service lines in our community, which is a very high concentration, half of our housing stock right now. Roughly when the drinking water revolving fund loan was presented, that alone to address 60% of lead service lines was close to, this was again pre-inflation, before COVID, probably about $12-13 million. So it's a significant expense, and it is a mandate by the state of Michigan that we have no choice to, that we can't defer those, we have to replace them. With the current millage proposal, what we're looking at is not only could you address, with that 1.7, you could have a section of water main done, you could have a section of sewer lining done, you could have, several lead service lines that are done over the years. So let's say 10 years fast forward that we go ahead and we address, however many hundreds or whatnot of lead service lines. We still then have those other years, from the other, we'll call it 8 or 9 that we have left for compliance, that on the back end, working with Baker Tilly and also looking at our water sewer rates, we have to consider for additional costs on capital, adding to capital to help pay for those lead service lines. And they've really fluctuated because in Grosse Pointe Park especially, you have some homes that are like in the West Park area that it's really small area from the sidewalk to the home to be able to do, where if you go onto, a home maybe on Grand Marais or Windmill Point, the stretch for the lead service line, you can estimate you're going to see anywhere from, could be $5,000 to $10,000, depending on contractor availability and just the length of time. So this millage will be able to help address some of those. Is it going to complete all lead service lines? No, because in today's dollars, you're looking at probably $16 million just to address the lead service lines if we were to do them today of all lead service lines. While we have, the other needs that are considered in this millage, you have the water main, you've got sewer lining, you've got other maintenance, manholes and other areas that need to be addressed.
Which again are currently under our budget for O&M. But are you?
For
Patching.
patching, not replacing.
Not replacing.
And they are 100 years old.
So for 10 years, you're suggesting, if I'm understanding it correctly, that it may not be enough money to cover what you're saying.
For lead service lines?
Yes.
Or, yeah, if we wanted to be able to do, if we did just lead service lines, it may, again, with inflation or cost, it could go up. We may not be able to address them all.
Which I would wonder why we wouldn't do it out for 20 versus 10.
Councilmember Brenner?
I was just gonna say, isn't part of the reasoning also that it gives us some flexibility when we're applying for all these grants, some hope that perhaps we're doing it for 10 years, we're not asking for, we need tens and tens of millions of dollars beyond this millage of work done. We're not asking for it all at once in hopes that, some of the money, I assume, we're constantly applying for these grants. And so, in hopes of getting some of them, we're not asking for the full shebang. This also gives us a lot of time for corrective action at the end of 10 years. Am I correct that this is why we're not going on 20 years, why we're asking for the 2.5 mils?
2.5 mils, which is roughly 1.7.
Instead of 4 or 5 or 7.
And the thing we have to account for is Headley rollback. That's also going to be a challenge over this millage. And then there's two pieces of legislation that were recently passed by the federal government. You have the American Rescue Plan and the Investment Infrastructure Jobs Act. So those pools of money that the state of Michigan provided to communities, and then they went to the county governments and local municipalities, we received roughly about 1.1, which the vast majority all went to Pipe Tech, for that expense. Then, the hope for us communities, we were reaching out to Eagle and our legislators that, would there be, a grant program similar to what was called SAW? And that was a program that was basically money given to communities, and it was not a loan. It was a program given. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that several of those monies have been pulled into the loan program. So you're actually having to pay them back. They are low interest loans from the state, but, it was a disappointment, and there's still hope out there that several of the money that still has not been allocated, the state will provide for in the forms of grants. So what could happen, we could have a year from now that we have a grant program for lead service lines that could be, passed on from the federal government down to the state through Eagle. So you're seeing a lot more discussion of lead service lines than ever before. Obviously, the Flint water crisis elevated that. The state of Michigan enacted the highest compliance rules for lead service. And now the federal government sees it as a critical need for health and safety across the United States. And so I'm confident that the value that you'll see, coming from those dollars will eventually, hopefully, reach communities for our chance to be able to apply for them.
In the near future or in the?
That's all depending on, whether Eagle has additional grants or whatnot. But right now they've been formed into loan programs.
Okay, Pro Tem?
Well, I was just going to say to take on what Councilmember Brenner was saying, is that it also gives the city, I think, through Baker Tilly and our capital improvement funding over the next 10 years to allocate those dollars so that we're not having to go back out in our regular course of day. And we don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years, but that is the plan. And in 10 years, if we find out that, hey, if we have to redo a smaller portion of this millage to replace those, we may. I mean, the reality is we need the cash to replace this. We don't have it. So, you know.
One way or another, we gotta pay for it.
Right, and I think with, with Baker Tilly coming on board, looking at our capital improvement plan and finally getting a rolling capital improvement project plan in place, that will be able to address these things and look at a lot of levels.
So I just have two more questions.
Yes.
On the same topic?
Yes.
Okay.
So for those residents that have already spent the $5,000, $2,000, $10,000 to replace those lead lines, what happens to those folks who have already paid for those?
In regards to the millage or
Yes,
because
if the
they paid?
millage comes and, they've already paid for them, what happens to those?
Under the proposal for the millage, that would be for every homeowner within the community. So whether or not you replaced on your own the lead service line, that's something you did on your behalf that you still would be charged for that millage, in consideration of, obviously, there's other water mains, sewer lining, manholes, other operation maintenance.
So if we're collecting 1.7 over 4,200 customers, right, it's on average, I think you said about $450 each or somewhere around there for each home. Based on
$450 based on 170,000 value.
Based on property tax value.
That's correct.
Why was the consideration, or maybe it wasn't, the consideration of those fees based on the lot frontage? As we all are sharing use of those water lines, it seems that if we did instead of property value, we actually made if we looked at how much of frontage was actually, utilizing that much of a water main and made some kind of allocation. And I did some quick examples here. So lots under 40 feet, like on Weyburn through Lake Point they would pay approximately $225 per year, or lots 40 to 80 feet would pay $375, and lots in excess of 8 feet, like those on Windmill, would pay, they say, $575 a year. This feels to me a bit more equal in terms of cost distribution, as opposed to, I did some quick numbers for myself. I'll end up paying $800 or $900 in additional tax. But on Windmill, someone has a $3 million house, they're going to pay $7,500. Now, maybe I'm arguing for those folks who live on Windmill, they don't really care because they live on Windmill and they may have a bigger budget than I, but that cost allocation distribution. So I'm just considering why not consideration in some kind of, in that what seemed to be more equally distributed, and isn't considered.
So from my understanding, it looks like you're basing that upon probably the sewer assessment or the sewer separation that was done about 20 years ago, correct?
Well, I'm just basing it on looking at the size of the lot and how much of our infrastructure passes in front of that lot.
Yeah.
Right?
No, yeah, so
City Manager, are you okay? I'm wondering if there's not a more productive, maybe like if we got a list of questions from Councilmember Gallagher. So I'm just concerned about our staff team. This is a lot of detail and you've done a great job and I really appreciate it. This is good discussion. Would you feel better if you had some time to kind of contemplate this and maybe answer these questions and perhaps do them at a committee level or that?
yeah.
Just again, it's great discussion. They're good suggestions. I just want to respect you because this is a lot coming at you.
These are actually some of the questions I asked last time. And
But you had a month to send us, sorry.
I did ask them.
But you didn't say, okay.
I asked them in the last.
If I can just say, the moral story, we all are aware that infrastructure is in dire need of a lot of work across the board. It's not just water mains, it's not just sewers. The flooding is what really brought it to the fore. But before the flooding, anybody who was paying attention, the former infrastructure committee or the public services committee had meetings where they identified the scope of the water main, sewer, and lead line replacement. I'm not here to relitigate the past, but in my role in infrastructure, working with OHM, working with Baker Tilly, the city, we have work that needs to be done. There are multiple avenues to try to pursue funding, which we are trying to do. But the point is, if you take a look at the pie, an ever larger amount of money is being gobbled up with repairs that give us no value add. And at some point, if we don't start addressing, especially the water mains, our budget is going to be completely consumed by just trying to keep the thing running. Again, we have a good team in place. We are going to try to start moving forward. 2.5 mills 10 years, yeah, there's no perfect answer to it, frankly. And I'm not advocating, but the millage is going to hit me disproportionately harder than it would if it was on the water sewer bills. But frankly, we figured for a number of reasons, and there will be FAQs addressing all this, and we're trying to, and I thought in the previous meeting, City Manager Seisman put together a very good PowerPoint that tried to outline as much information as possible. Again, there is no perfect answer to this, but the point is we have to move into a phase of actually being able to work on these issues. And frankly, we see the millage as being the least burdensome financial request of residents, as opposed to, let's say, a bond where we're paying interest. Furthermore, it allows us to have a longer term action plan on all this. Again, we talked about this at length in the previous infrastructure meeting, we put that out as a notice. But again, we're doing our best to try to answer all questions. As we all know, social media, we are not at liberty to sit there and have back and forth and debate, but we are absolutely acutely aware of every question. We're trying to compile them. We're trying to work towards having clear-cut FAQs to answer them. The questions we can't answer up front, we will get you answers for them. But the point is, and I think that's the one universal thing, and frankly, I thought that was one of the linchpins of the previous election. The residents understand that there's a need to do something, and it's not just throw something into the wall. We want to have a concerted, well thought out, structured plan to build upon and upgrade the infrastructure that we have. And after a lot of deliberation, we came upon this conclusion as being our best option. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. This is now one of the reasons we put it to the voters. We put it to the residents to make that decision. And however November falls, we're already looking at what's the other option if it doesn't go through. But the point is, we have a need that has to be addressed, and we're working at it.
And all these are great questions that are great architecture for the FAQ, right? So
Yeah,
the more we know
it's all
about them,
good.
and I've reached out in advance, because that's the most productive way to get that started. And it's got to be made clear to the community too. This is all about fiscal prudency and responsibility, and we're putting the decisions in the hands of voters, right? We want input. This council is not out there advocating one way or the other for a millage. It's one option of many. We have to pay for it somehow. It will get paid for. So I think this is the essence of transparency. We're looking for input, and we know that Baker Tilly is also recommending that we pursue this. Those are the third parties that we paid for some expertise for as well.
I just have a question based on what
Councilmember just said. I took a note here as you were talking, and you were talking about the repairs, and you said the repairs have no value add.
We talked about the water mains.
They have, the repairs that we're doing have no value add. So I'm trying to understand, if the repairs have no value add, then we're asking the community to give us money to repair those values.
No, replace.
We're talking about, when you said water main, you kept talking about the maintenance budget. When a water main breaks, a water main runs half a mile. When there is a rupture of the water main, they patch that spot. 5 feet down the way, it can break again. Macacadgew, and again, we talked about this in the previous meeting, we articulated the numbers. We have lost approximately 46 million gallons of water in the last decade in the city. That is real dollars to the residents. The Macacadgew water main, we've had 10 major breaks. And beyond the cost of it, it's also quality of life. If you have a water main break, we've all had it where all of a sudden our water pressure goes down. The point is, we don't want to just be spending all of our money and our labor and our resources patching something when we know, unfortunately, the reality is a cast iron water main, the breaks are going to increase. And this was identified years ago. The previous council identified this. And then again, I'm not relitigating. The sooner you work on it, the less cost to residents. That's one of the reasons why the plan that we're putting together, the idea, the intention is that as we're fixing, some of the money that we were spending the previous year on repairs, we're spending a smaller portion on repairs, and then we can put that to further capital improvement. That's one of the reasons why we want to be so urgent in getting started on, again, identifying the biggest issues. All the water mains in the city need work. But for example, we're targeting Macacadgew right now because that is, again, the biggest area of need.
So again, I would say no one's arguing there isn't a need, but the discussion is around what is the best approach and how do we do that?
And that's why we have these
That's why we
committees, and that's
have
what we're going over.
That's why we have the questions in advance. And the value add is the investment versus the repair. It's the classic Band-Aid metaphor.
Well, and as we've said,
You can put a Band-Aid on, or you can.
and again, I tend to not like the term, for example, with water mains, we're not replacing, we're upgrading. Because as we're going in, as we're doing the work, we're going to put in better materials, larger diameter, again, better service. So.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, anybody else have comments under council comment? Are we ready to move on?
This is just council comment. sewer.
It's on unfinished
Anything,
business.
unfinished.
And there's a second council comment near the end.
Yeah, the only small comment I wanted to bring up, and I forgot to do so on the consent agenda, was there was a budget that Jane put together for expenditures through the first quarter of July. That is on the website for anybody to see, transparency standpoints, those that are interested.
Thank you for pointing
And
that out.
once you bring that up, I have a comment on that, so thank you for opening the discussion on that. And in the spend under water and sewer, we see, under the water and sewer, fund, we see that we have what looks to be a deficit in the operating budget of 908. I'd like to point out that what looks to me is that deficit is about $575,000 of that is actually depreciation. And another, we have assets of about 300,000 that has purchased in equipment. So while it shows a deficit, about $900,000 of that is purchase of assets, as well as depreciation. So we're probably close to a break even. But again, that's up for transparency. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we move into new business. We have the Great Lakes Water Authority Water Services Contract Amendment number 1. Who will be leading that discussion? Was that you, City Manager Seisman?
Yeah, and then I'll ask Patrick and have if there's any follow-up from there.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
so GLW, so last year, we had a GLW water services contract that came to West Park into the city council. The city council adopted that water services contract that was for 30 years. And so every 4 years, as part of the GLWA contract alignment process, each customer is able to review the water model contract for negotiating contract demands and updating the contract. And so us working with OHM, we were able to look at historical data, reviewing annual volume, max day, peak hour information to GLWA from 2016 to 21. And this process, we looked at billing and meter data for that peak hour, max day flows, and make sure not coincide with water main breaks or building fires that would, skew the consumption data. So we want to make sure anytime you have breaks or fires that's not included in there, because obviously it's going to go jacked up from there. So GLW is good. Anytime there's a break, we just send a list to them. They realize that, okay, that's what happened. So as well, after review with OHM, we decided to have a meeting with GLWA, and it was determined that the contract volume, day, and peak hour could be modified to align with our consumption. So we established an annual volume about 58 million cubic feet, reduced the max day volume from 3.23 billion gallons per day to about 3.09, and we maintained the maximum peak hour volume from 5.31 billion gallons per day. Based on these recommended changes, the city could realize an annual contract savings of up to $22,000. That with this year. So with you, council, there is the amendment for the water services contract, and there's also a resolution that the Great Lakes Water Authority requires as part of that adoption. And so if there's any questions
Before going into discussion, would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Peters, seconded by Gallagher. Discussion, and I would ask the assistant city attorney, do we have to read the resolution as part of the motion, or is it adequate to say approve the resolution authorizing DLWA water contract amendment as contained in the packet? Or should I go ahead and read it?
No, you do not have to read it verbatim, provided that the operative terms were sufficiently identified
Okay,
by city manager Seisman, so that one agrees that.
I would agree with this. All right, with that, is there any discussion or questions for the manager? Okay, seeing none. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
Alfio? And Mayor Hodges?
Yes, motion carries. The resolution approving authorization of the GLWA water contract amendment has passed. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the bid proposal for alley resurfacing. That is, did I miss one? Yes, I skipped one. I did it. Bid
Oh,
proposal
you
for
know,
alley
you were
resurfacing.
Yeah, we just did OHM all. And
Yes, we did. We
Yes.
were a little tired.
Yes.
So, City Manager, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, so there's a little bit of context, and I'm really proud to say that, we've been talking about it with this community, that there's a real dire need for alleys to be addressed in this community. So, at the end of the paving season last year, we decided that, let's start looking into alleys. We're actually addressing them. These are alleys that have been separated. So only alleys that we have separated would be considered for paving. Any of those not separated, off the table until they are. And so, Grosse Pointe Park working with OHM, we did get several, pricing last year that for consideration of what would those alleys be. And then fast forward to 2022, we went out for bid to our vendors through BidNet, and we had 19 vendors, BidNet, which is a publicly, available, so anyone can log on there. We had 19 people take a look, 0 bid on it. So we're, back to the drawing board. So working with OHM and DPW, we decided let's take a look into those companies that provided us last year if they'd be interested. So we had 3 last year that were interested in the project. And after contacting them, only 1 was interested in doing the project now. Obviously, this is all, consideration of, alleys are difficult enough. Not many companies are interested in doing this work because they'd like to have their bigger machines that they can just go down the street, mill and fill. And so they actually have to have specialized equipment to be able to go down these alleys. So, the proposal in front of City Council would be to award a Hutch paving company for a price of $141,000. Jeffrey and Allied were not interested. And why, the increase, well-documented cost of excavation of material, petroleum, they're used in this material. And so if council were to approve this bid tonight, we would be able to start this work in completion in the fall. And Patrick, as well, won't we be updating several manholes in the area as well?
Yeah, so as part of the.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yes, as part of the evaluation, we did find a few manholes, sanitary manholes that had basically covers with holes in them.
Yeah.
So the plan is to replace those with solid covers, so that'll help with some of the additional inflow.
So there'll be no infiltration going in that system.
Yep.
Okay.
So before moving into discussion, is there a motion to approve proceeding with Hutch Paving to complete alley paving as noted in the OHM memorandum dated 8/11/2022 at a cost of $141,000?
So moved.
Moved by Meyer, seconded by Gallagher. Is there discussion? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, just real quick, we budgeted funds on this. It's coming up the street.
Yeah.
Street funds, and so we have that.
Yes. Yeah, we do have that in budget.
I just want to make sure that's.
And I should say too, those alleys that are being addressed, I can't believe I didn't even say that. I apologize. So in between Charlevoix and Verner, you have an alley between, that'd be Weyburn, Maryland. You also have an area between Maryland and Beaconsfield. That's actually 2 alleys there, blocks. And then right behind, actually right outside our door at City Hall, we're gonna have that area paved as well. We have another area by Hampton Road close to us. So it's a start, we're getting there. We're gonna continue, moving forward. That alleys are a real critical infrastructure. So it's a little
And
easier to
thank you for
drive.
that diligence, City Manager Seisland. I wish McKay family was here because I want her to know that they've been heard, right? They've come to us at this table previously with concerns about the alley. We do see it pop up on social media, and I hope the community sees that this body is committed to ensuring the resources are at the table within the bandwidth that we do have. I know Mayor Pro Tem Caulfield, you're also looking at this in which committee? Yes, under ordinance, yeah, discussion there as well. So, and I know City Manager Seisland, if you have any suggestions for the community regarding code enforcement as well. We're really asking the community to be a teammate in that. Let us know when there are concerns so that we can dedicate the resources to getting those resolved. So, and I just would have one, and I already know the answer to this because I asked you, but for the benefit of the community, yesterday, there was a question about additional road resurfacing to it. There are no additional projects scheduled for the balance of this current construction. So it'll be next year where that program will continue. So just so it's clear in the community, this is the alleys. Roads will commence again next year and for the balance of this year. All right, well, with that, if there's no further discussion, I would call the question and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
Caulfield?
Yes.
Junior?
Yes.
Van Hollen?
Yes.
And Mayor Hydos.
Yes, motion carries. Hutch Paving has been hired to improve the alleys at a cost of $141,000. Thank you, OHM team and our administration for walking us through that. The next item on the agenda is Fire Code Ordinance number 232. I'll turn it again over to our Assistant City Manager, Erica Shell, as well as our Mayor Pro Tem, Chair of the Ordinance Review Committee.
Oh, and I do think Chief has a brief comment. This was something that
Yes.
came to us from the Public Safety Department. So I'd let him introduce it.
So, thank you. Members of council, the item before you for your consideration is the updated 2021 National Fire Code. This ordinance has been drafted to automatically incorporate all future updates and revisions so that we won't have to bring it back to you again.
Thank you.
That's about it.
I like that. Get that man raised.
Rolling update.
All right, with that, is there a
I'd
motion?
like to make a motion to approve.
I second.
Moved by McMillan, seconded by Gallagher. Any discussion? Clerk, please.
Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
Caulfield?
Yes.
Junior?
Yes.
Millage?
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges?
Yes, motion carries. Ordinance number, Fire Code, you know what we're doing. Fire Code Ordinance number 232 was approved and adopted. Next item on the agenda, resolution to vacate waiver. And I think actually we're just setting a public hearing, correct? Not actually doing the vacation itself, but Michelle, I'll let you carry on.
So-
That discussion.
So under the 2019 purchase agreement with URIF, there is an agreement to convey certain city-owned property. Part of that property includes what is dedicated as Weyburn, but if you went out there, you would never know. There's no street there, no one drives there. So this is a cleanup item to start that process of vacating Weyburn. Technically, nothing, you can't build in a street, so it's important to make sure that that's cleaned up so that the property as does what it is agreed to do. So that is what the resolution says. There does have to be a public hearing where the public can comment on the proposed vacation. And so that has been set for the next regularly scheduled council meeting. If you have any questions about where it's located or what it's used for, I think nothing, but feel free to ask. Now is your opportunity between now and September to gather up the information, make your comments.
Thank you for that. Is there a motion to
So
get this
moved.
item on? Moved by Wiener, seconded by Gallagher. Are there any questions for our team? Seeing none, clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher? Yes. Caulfield?
Yes.
Junior?
Yes.
Millage? Mayor Hodges? And Mayor
Yes. Motion carries to pass the resolution to vacate Weyburn with public comment between now and the September 19th council meeting. So please, if you have comments, get them to us. And then that brings us to council comment, the last council comment of the evening. What do you might tell? Yes, Mr.
I
McLean.
have a comment. It's exciting to see as many residents as we have that apply for the different commissions. And I think that it's something that we want to encourage everybody to have an interest into giving back to the city to do so and keep some of the commissions fresh. Because there's so many talented people in our city. We want to involve as many people as we can.
Well said. Thank you. Other comments?
I have one if no one else has any.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Gallagher.
I recently met with some residents who had concerns regarding the discussions around the sewer and water tax and how abruptly it ended in our last meeting. So I did a bit of homework. As a council member, we have rules that we have to follow. Those rules are set by our charter. They're set by a code of conduct, and they're set by these Robert Rules of Order, which we have a little cheat sheet here, which allows us. We have decorum and civility. It's a debate. And because of that, we need a functioning democracy. And in that functioning democracy, it expects that we will have difficult questions. It expects that we will have tough challenges. And it expects that we will have criticism of ideas. So these rules provide room for the due respect of a point of view. The mayor is empowered to move the meeting forward. When discussions move off topic, or conversations become belligerent, slanderous, or threatening. During council discussions, once a member has been recognized by the chair to speak, discussions are confined to the questions at hand and its merits. And that council member is not to be interrupted except by a point of order or a point of privilege, according to the rules of conduct. These 2 points come back to off-topic discussions or slanderous. The support I received from residents following the interruption and shutdown of my questions regarding the millage proposals last meeting was welcomed. As many of you know, I do my homework and I ask a lot of questions. But I believe these questions are the same questions that many residents have. And I am a resident and I have them. But what surprised me most are the emails that I received from the mayor, 2 of them since our last meeting. One, regarding her management of our last meeting and her desire to professionalize our meeting and to be most productive, stating, "It is rare that detailed discussion should take place at the council meeting itself." She presented scenarios that which we should consider in achieving these goals. One, where we have no limits to debate at council. This is currently what we have, and we abide by, if we abide by and following the rules, the Roberts Rules of Order. The second suggestion was to put limits on debate. And if need be, quote, "we can amend the council rules and code of conduct." What I find most concerning is that not one of my questions asked in the last meeting or during my opportunity to address the millage proposals were even attempted to be answered, which is why I asked them again today, which caused a lot of debate. Moreover, a motion to end the debate was made and seconded. A motion which is not even on the rules of order. But I am one voice and one vote, whether on committee or on full council, and I have earned the right to speak. In my humble opinion, debate fosters a better resolution. As such, I'm not in favor of limiting debate. And I humbly ask that our mayor and our council does not remove it or try to squash it.
Mayor Hodges?
Yes,
So if I can, first off, I want to commend Mayor Hodges for running tight, organized meetings. When I ran for council, one of the principal concepts that I was running on, and Councilmember Gallagher, as did you, micromanagement was a problem in the previous council. We were running 4 or 5 hour meetings with not a lot to show for it. Now, I love debate, okay, but there is an effective way to do it as well. I don't want to air this out, but you're talking about the meeting last month. You had a month. You didn't send a question to anyone on infrastructure. There's a very big difference between constructive action and constructive dialogue and commiseration between a group. I'm happy to. If you want to send questions, there's a way to do it effectively. Okay? But again, I don't think it's appropriate to try to suggest that Mayor Hodges is doing anything untoward. She's following the rules, and I frankly think she's got tight, organized meetings. I think compared to what we ran against, meetings are actually getting somewhere. And there's a better way to do it. So again, I think it's kind of an unfounded attack and accusation.
I would suggest that by simply asking the questions in the council meeting, asking them, I have an expectation that they would be answered and addressed. The meeting was 1 month ago. I have yet to receive an answer to any, which is why I asked them again this meeting.
Again, provide coherent questions. I'm happy to answer them.
I did in the meeting, which you actually made the motion to end the debate.
And Councilmember Gallagher, I remain committed to working with you. I reached out to you since then and asked to sit down with you. I do hope you'll reconsider. You chose not to meet with me. That offer remains, and City Manager Seisel and I both have reached out to you in the last few days asking for your questions so that we would have them to respond, and you declined to submit that list. So just so the community knows, this organizational culture is really important and a team is really important, and you have a lot. Great critical thinking. These questions are all excellent. I think they help inform our decisions. They make us better as a team. It's making sure we have the function. It's good governance, and we're all learning. We're a young team, right? So I'm going to assume that's what it is. This is a learning curve thing, right? And when we use our committees, when we use our administration, and we effectively follow those tools and best practices, we're going to be stronger as a team. Nobody's against you. Everybody wants you. This is a team that is gelling. We want you, we need you, and we're just asking that we follow certain procedures. So that's all I ask of you. And again, I really hope we do get that meeting together, because I think this community expects us to work out these issues together, one-on-one, and not publicly like this. You don't need to see the sausage making, right? We know how to get along. We're adults, and that's my commitment to you. And thank you, Councilmember Wiener, for your support. I asked all of my colleagues for input on how the last meeting was managed, because it is important. I have my way of running meetings. My career has always taught me efficient meetings are important. That's what professionals do. You get through them, and you don't compromise the debate at all in any way. You just make sure it's done properly, as you said. And as you mentioned in the email that I did send, I offered various scenarios saying I'm open to however this group wants to function. If you want more debate at this table and you want meetings to go longer, you just tell me that. I'm here for you. That's my job, is to keep these meetings civil and working well together. And I hope you see a lot of civility, because that's something that's very important to me. So again, I remain open to feedback. I'm not one of those people that is just like this and hammer at all. And so that's my sense of what I'm hearing, and I remain open to that. And with that, if there are no other comments.
I have one.
Yes,
I'd like
please.
to say that I would be very happy to meet with you, and while your offer meeting with me after that meeting, I felt it was important that you and I meet one-on-one. And that was my hope, that we could have a one-on-one meeting. I know the invitation came from Tom, and it's no disrespect to Tom, but I was hoping that we would have a one-on-one. And as far as the questions that you asked me for, did send me an email on Saturday, but I had not yet prepared for my meeting and cannot do sometimes until Monday. And so when I have the time to prepare my questions, if I have time, I will submit them to you, but I receive a package on Friday. I have time. When I have time, I get to my doing my homework and I prepare them. I don't always have time to submit my questions ahead of
We
time.
made it clear we were here to answer your questions.
Just a,
Excellent.
just a point of clarity, the invitation didn't come from me, I was included on it, which I would be more than happy to sit down and meet. But also when it comes to time, I mean, it is part of our council to review our consent agenda. We get it a week ahead of time with the option of sending those questions within that time frame. We have to make time. That's what we're elected to do. I understand, you know,
We all have busy lives, but
And for the
but
consent
to
agenda,
come
I did
out,
send
but to come out and
questions.
say that you don't have time until the day before, I mean, I don't know, I start
That's
prepping
not
for this
always
meeting
true.
on Friday.
okay, but I've just said my.
Not
piece.
always true.
Well, and I sent a very thoughtful and respectful email and invitation to you. So, and it still stands, and I hope we can get there.
September 15th.
This community needs us to.
September 15th was the day I said that I was back from holiday and available to me. So I hope we can do that.
All right, anybody else? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
No, I'm sorry, I was doing a
No more questions.
sweet motion.
Well, with that, our public comment, you must have a reaction to that, right? Come on. Is there anybody here who would like to be heard this evening? Thank you for sticking it out with us. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I've got to assume there are two wheels out in the parking lot waiting for you, rather than four.
I live 3 minutes away, so
Could you please come to the podium and introduce yourself so we know who we're having the pleasure of speaking with? I believe you've been here before.
I'm David Spike. I live on Lake Point Street, a block away from here. We've been here almost 4 years. We moved from St. Louis and we've lived in different cities. I'm very grateful to be part of the team here. And one of my passions, I have several passions, but one of them is gardening and making a good environment for our citizens. And I've recently, in the last few years, become quite the native plant guy. And how to make a transformation and also to educate our citizens. And I mean, I could go into a lot of details, but there's a famous prominent person in the native plant community called Doug Thompson. He's from the University of Delaware, has been a professor for 40 years, and he's written several books recently about native plants and the importance of thinking about that. And he's proposed that we convert half of our 40 million acres of lawn turf in the country to native plants. And, I was listening to the long discussion about infrastructure and flooding, and turf grass does not help. And if we convert even a portion of that into native plants and things that support species and songbirds, there's been a 30% decline in songbirds over the last few decades. You have to have the right plants, the right bugs to support the ecosystem. Oak trees are one of the best sources of, they support several hundred Lepidoptera, which is bugs. And one thing that struck me a few years ago was a chart that showed what other plants support. Hostas, boxwoods, one of the most common plants in our community, support.
You just
Anyway.
need to get well.
So my plan is to organize some type of native plant garden in one of the parks and have a demonstration, and part of it is maintenance. So there's new gardens that have low maintenance, like a gravel garden. So anyway, we have options to help.
All right, stick around, make sure we have your contact info, okay? Because I'm hearing a beautification commissioner, I'm hearing some sustainability issues. Oh, there's a lot in there, David. And I need to tell you about Pete Outoff on Belle Isle this weekend, because if you like native plants, you need to come meet Pete.
Sunday morning.
Yeah, okay, good, you already know.
Okay.
All right, I'll see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the community who would like to chat? Yes, Mr. Collins, welcome. You stuck it out. That's true, it's not too bad.
It's a short meeting. So, Terry Collins. I was here, this last meeting was the first city council meeting I've probably been doing 14 years. I've lived in the park, so. And at points, I thought I was at a school board meeting, honestly. It was a little frustrating for me because I've seen discussion shut down at school board meetings repeatedly. And while I understand that we want meetings to be efficient, they also have to be effective. And you're right, we can't compromise today. When there's questions, yes, it'd be great every time to have all the questions asked up front, but as a public who doesn't get here that often or watches online, it's critical that we understand what the questions that are being asked. If someone's asking a question, more than likely someone in the public has the same questions. They're not going to have that opportunity to meet one-on-one with city council members to get their questions answered, right? So if you answer them in a public forum, the more we know about it. And, I don't know if I'm for or against the millage at this point, I have no idea. But what I do understand is, I have a house that's moderately priced with 35 feet of frontage. And so my neighbor down the street has the same house, was built 5 years ago. And I don't think they want to pay, their house has a new lead service line. It doesn't have a lead service line, it has a new service line, which is not lead because they built a new house. So what benefit are they getting from that? I understand that we all benefit from an infrastructure that moves water away from our houses and doesn't allow basements to flood. But when you're talking about water service coming into my house, that's very specific to each house. And the cost associated with that is very specific to each house. And I think that if you're asking people to pay for something in a millage, then you have to be very clear. And I know your FAQ is being developed but it's gonna have to be a very succinct FAQ to me to vote for a millage to raise my taxes. I don't know, when are you gonna start? What are you gonna do? Year one, you talked about having shovels in the ground next spring, right? What are you gonna do next spring? I didn't hear that in the last meeting. And I understand everyone's worked very hard on researching what we can do to stop the water, from coming into people's basements. I was one of the lucky ones who didn't have water come into my basement, but my neighbors on one side and across the street did, so I get it. And I don't want water to come into my basement in the future, but I want to understand what you're going to attack first. It's like if my house and I was going to have a bathroom, right? And they were going to tell me, hang on, I got 30 seconds. And I was going to get it. I was trying to get 10 grand. Okay, it's 10 grand. But what do I get for 10 grand? I just like to know what we're getting for the money. And I think it's critical that people understand what they're getting. But I appreciate everyone's work. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good feedback, Mr. Collins. You know where to reach you, right, City Manager Seidlin, so we can get that out and get you the answers you need. Okay, is that everyone? All right, I believe that brings us to adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Seconded by McMillan to adjourn at 8:48. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Brennan.
Yes.
Gallagher. Yes. Caulfield.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.
We'll have a clock next time, so, yeah, Courtney's going on Amazon, so we don't have to.
Oh, man, you're gonna get the shot clock?
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly, like a shot clock.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.